Hey guys, what's up? This is Freenachos, and in this video we're going to be reviewing the 2025 season of High Stakes Poker Episode 1. And what we're going to be doing is I'm going to roll a clip, give you guys my honest feedback on how everyone's playing, give you guys my thoughts on some of the exploits that they might be using, and I'll show you guys some of the data that I gathered in the Dominate with Data course that is now live on Run It Once, where I quantified every single node of the game tree, looked at how solvers are playing, how regulars are playing, how they are deviating, how recreationals are playing, and how they are deviating. And I did that both for online games as well as live. And that live poker section is now live in the course. So if you're interested in that, if you're a live player, it might be useful to you. We'll start off here with Steven making a very standard 3-bet. And he's 3-betting Robo. So Robo checks, which is quite reasonable. The pre-flop call is a bit loose depending on the positions, but it can be okay. Ace King in position here. You can't bet your entire range, but a hand like Ace King will bet reasonably often. So betting would be fine, checking would be fine. So, interesting spot here, right off the bat. Robo has the option to check raise, which would be fine. He also has the option to check call, which also would be fine. I think one of the things that we need to consider is how often are players here bet folding. And one thing that we can see is, and this is regulars, fold versus check raise is 37 by the pool. And the check, and for Pio it's 33. And one thing that we can see as well is that the pool is t-betting too often, generally speaking here. So they're simplifying to range bet too often, which is what this player, whose name I forgot, Steven might be doing here. It might simply be c-betting too often because he has position, range advantage, typically speaking, at least pre-flop.
A heart in his hand would be coveted to allow Roble to have some flop peeled back doors that fold for 22,000, and for Roble 23 rather.
This is a good point by the commentator. In order to be betting here, what you'd want preferably is you'd want a heart in your hand, so your opponent is check call, check folding some of the hands like ace jack of clubs, ace jack of diamonds. Like now you have that ace of diamonds and you're blocking those folds, which isn't great. All in all, this can be a fine bet. It could be a bit too much, but probably it's a reasonable bet in most cases. The 9 is, in most cases, more or less a blank. It will depend a bit on the positions that these players are in, which I'm not entirely sure of. So, depending, like if this is a wide formation, then there's going to be a reasonable amount of 9x in Roble's range, and Steven needs to be a bit more chill. If this is a tighter formation, let's say early position versus, middle position 3-bet versus early position or something like that, then this bet is quite likely reasonable because you're allowed to bet very often, because in position just has a very tight range, out of position has a very tight range, and the in position player has more of the higher pairs, and then the out of position player has more of the lower pairs, and so the 9 is not that relevant. There are not too many pre-flop calls, generally speaking, with hands like 9s, 8-6 suited, stuff like that. The 7-5 suited is kind of loose depending on the positions that both pairs have. It could be fine. It also depends on how deep you're playing, how many big blinds, what the SPR is. If this is blind v blind, it's fine. If this is tighter formation, then it is a bit on the looser side. But I imagine that Roble is going to have a skill advantage in versus pretty much anyone in these games. So yeah, probably fine. Raise and I call by Steven. The king jack offsuit usually is either a 3-bet or a fold. I wouldn't really call that at any meaningful frequency. I think from the small range you can mostly simplify it to just 3-bet or fold. Here we got a 3-bet by our friend Gottlieb, and this 3-bet is too small. He needs to go larger because he's squeezing. So he needs to go like 14-ish, 13 maybe. 12 would be okay, but this is basically too small. You're giving everyone the price to draw. If you're sitting there with 6-4, yeah, like for this price, right? Like you're just going to invest. And same thing goes for Gonzalez. That's a pretty good flop for Gonzalez. Godly probably just needs to range check this board. Versus 2 players, I would at least. Like there's, sure he has some flushes here, but it's not his board. He's not really 3-betting pocket 7s, pocket 5s. Like random 9-7 is not going to be in his 3-betting range very often. So he's going to have a lot of hands like this, and these hands don't really want to bet very often. And versus 2 players, you want to be particularly careful because, well, you can see right here, you're playing versus 2 ranges, and the combined strength of those 2 ranges means that a hand that would normally be good enough to c-bet on the board like this, so let's say something like, I don't know, pocket 10s without a diamond or something like that, is now not as strong anymore because, well, if you're sitting there with a7 or king 7 or something like that, and you get a c-bet, and you share the burden of defense with someone else, and you can see that he's c-betting into 2 players, you're like, well, this 7 is kind of weak right now. So I hope he checks, but he c-bets. Not too surprising, as we know that from the data, they are c-betting too often, right? So this seems like a prime example. Gonzalez raises immediately. It's an interesting spot, like it's a fine raise. You got to be somewhat careful though, because on these monotone boards, you need to slow play quite a bit. And the reason for that is simple. If you're raising all of your flushes, then when you do call, suddenly 2 black jacks are effectively the nuts as the other position player. Now when you're multi-way, this is a little bit less important, and just being a bit more honest makes more sense. But I wouldn't automatically raise this, and if you're sitting there as Steven, like alarm bells should be going off. Goldleap, same thing, should be a very easy fold. If you're sitting there with pocket jacks without a spade, your alarm bells should be going off, and you should probably fold because most players on these monotone textures are too aggressive with the strong hands and not aggressive enough with weaker hands. On a board like this, 9-7, like, something like Jack 10 of hearts or Jack 10 of spades might occasionally need to raise here to make sure that you don't just have flushes and better when you raise, and people are not doing that.
Our summer sale at Run It Once is happening right now. With thousands of videos and 2 new videos added every day, you'll always have fresh insights to keep your game sharp. You can watch how players study, they can teach you the lessons that they've learned from solvers, and you can see them apply it at the tables in real time. If you want to compete with the best, you need to train like them. Run It Once Elite. Sign up today and get inside of the minds of some of the world's best pros. Head over to runitonce.com to take advantage now.
Gottlieb opens ace-10 on the button. Very standard. Kulik just calls, which is kind of weird. Gottlieb calls with ace-10 offsuit, which is definitely a fold. Does Kulik call as well? Kulik calls with his ace-king. All sorts of shenanigans going on here. Gottlieb's hand is too weak to consider calling. Sure, you're playing a live game and you might want to give some action, and so you might not always want to play theoretically sound or perfect. But if you were, like, if you want to play well, if you're playing your local 2-5 game or 1-3 game, you're sitting there with your ace-10, just bitch it because it's just too weak to defend. You have infinite reversed implied odds. You're rarely going to flop or turn a very strong hand. So simply not good enough. If you want to play this, you'd want to 4-bet occasionally and just turn your hand into a bluff, blocking aces, ace-king, pocket 10s. But yeah, mostly this is just going to be a fold. Blesnik's 3-bet is fine. Kulik is just clicking buttons here and playing his hand way too passive. Like these slow plays may seem cool because you're under wrapping your hand and all sorts of stuff could happen, but the reality is he should have put a lot more money in at this point. Sure, versus Blesnik you would be flipping, which is annoying. But in a lot of these situations, versus other hands, Ace-King is able to shove pre-flop, make the other player fold his Ace-Queen or Ace-Jack type hand, and then you win a pot of whatever, 40k here. And when you just call, you never have that possibility to make your opponents fold, which is like generally where most of the EV for Ace-King comes from. If you get called, you still have decent equity versus pretty much every single hand. So yeah, not really a thing, but it happens anyway. I'm curious to see what Blesnik is doing. Like, intuitively, checking could make some sense. Personally, I would like to see him go for a very small c-bet of like 9k or something like that, 11k. He checks. It's fine, like you're not going to want to bet range here. But I would just go ahead and bet smaller. Now on the turn you'd want to bet big, I think. And there's plenty of pair plus roll type hands, so you're not really betting anything worse than Ace-Queen. Checking could be reasonable, but if you're going to be checking, then you want to check raise, I think. There's pretty much no King 10. Gottlieb's range, because he shouldn't really play King 10 offsuit, and the suited ones, those are going to be in there, but not very often. If you're Gottlieb here, probably you just want to bluff. Put it in, just put most of Blesnik's range in a cringe spot. Like you're going to not necessarily have a hand like King 10 very often, but occasionally you'd have it. You're going to have hands like pocket jacks occasionally, pocket nines, Jack 9, Queen Jack. So you definitely have a ton of hands that you'd want to value bet versus a range that's predominantly one pair. And so betting larger makes a lot of sense. It's kind of an awkward stack size, so I'd probably just go and bet 3/4 of the pot or something like that, and just put a lot of pressure on Blesnik's range. Maybe even just go pot sizing. We'll slide over it. He checks. Like the good thing here for a bluff, the argument for a bluff would be you're probably going to be blocking some calls, because some of the bluff catches that Blesnik is going to should be making is hands like Queen 10, Jack 10, that blocks him 10-8 and King 10. So yeah, I would pretty much always bluff there. So Robo opens the small blind. It seems like Kulik calls the big blind. I think you just want to 3-bet mostly with the straddle behind. Kulik bet in the dark, which is a bit weird and definitely losing, but you're playing on high stakes poker, so yeah, it's kind of whatever. Robo raises. As a pre-flop raiser, he's going to connect very well with his board and knows that Kulik is betting any 2. That is calling pre-flop, so this is just going to be a printing raise. I really like these by Robo. This is how to call. You just gotta fold your 9s. Even considering the fact that Robo will be raising aggressively, he will also be raising a hand like Ace-10 aggressively. It'll be interesting to see what Robo does here. I think he'd probably want to barrel. You're going to simply connect very well with this board. You have a very strong range, and it's going to be tough for Kulik to just call down. We get the impression at this point that Kulik likes calling though. Still fine, like versus recreationals, this is going to be fine. Like, let's look at some of the data here. Here we have some, you can see this donk bet frequency is too high. We don't really have the donk bet and then fold, because we just didn't have enough sample. But if you look at online data, then you'd see that people overfold when they face a raise in position, and so you'd want to raise very aggressively, because this donk bet of like 6.9 frequency, where it should be 1, is mostly just BS. Frankly put, it is about as strong as a checking range, so there's going to be random stuff in there like 8 high, middle pairs, whatever. and you want to raise aggressively. So yeah, and then on the turn, you get an overfolded spot as well in online games. We don't really have that in live poker, but online we do.
5 ways to the top
Market
page.
too. All right, here we go. Nice swap for Robo.
What, you a cash game?
No, we played the 52 together.
Commentator says nice flop for roll, and you're definitely okay with this flop, but realistically, if someone starts raising you here 5-way on the flop, you're also not very filled. So it's a good hand. Generally, it's going to be the best hand, but you don't really want to put yourself into too many situations where the entire stack goes in if you have ace queen here. Now you do. This changes things a bit. I think you probably just want to barrel here. Kulak really likes calling, it seems like. You just bet him out of the pot, so he might be a bit more tempted to make a stand here. And he already likes calling, right? So I would just bet myself rather than... Checking was not bad, by the way. To be frank, let's give the legend some credits here. Let's look at some data. So here we have how recreationals are defending versus c-bet. And we can see they're generally folding a bit too much on the flop, but the key point in his hand is this section, where how often do they step after calling the flop and then facing a check on the turn. So how often do they call flop, bet turn, and you can see that they bet way too aggressively there. And this is the same as online. So this, in fact, is a very good check by Robo, and the fact that Kulik bets a jack here, which he seems to be doing. Does he do that? Yeah, 15k, which is not good. Like, what is the purpose of betting jack 9 here? Like, you might get called by pocket 10s occasionally, but like even multi-way, probably 10s is just going to fold. A weaker jack is just going to not be in Robo's range very often. If Robo has ace jack, king jack, I'm imagining he calls. So there's basically, like, you're never making a better hand fold. Very seldomly you get called by your worse hands. And so this is just random button clicking, as we say online. And Robo is most of the poker face and will try to contain himself as much while he's thinking about his new Lamborghini as he's going to order after this session. Another thing like that makes this a very good check is the fact that he blocks some of the checkbacks with some ace highs. He had like ace 10. Yeah, I good. Just a main one, and that might not even check back. So to be fair, it doesn't really matter too much. If you have king queen here, you'd be willing to bet a bit more because you make it a bit more likely that either of the two other players has ace high that they're checking back on the turn. When you have ace queen, you make it a bit more likely that one of your opponents has something like king 10, king 9, and they might bet that a bit more, knowing that they never win a showdown. It's kind of a nuanced thing. Fairly relevant here. And he gets check raised here, and he's just immediately grabbing for chips. And this is just a fold, and this is exactly the reason why you shouldn't be betting the turn here, as the individual told. There's going to be situations where you can bet a hand that is never getting called by a weaker hand and never getting called by a better hand. Very few instances, but those are in particular when you are playing versus someone that is never check raising. If you're playing versus the old man Coffee, and the last time he check raised was in 2007 when he turned his quads and was finally happy to put some money in, then sure, you might want to bet here. Probably you want to bet really small, like, I don't know, 15% of the pot or something like that, because you're never getting check raised. You might get called by a weaker hand now, and also you make sure that you get to see the showdown because you have got position, you won't get donk bet on the river. So basically you're buying a cheap showdown, buying cheap equity realization, and you're denying some equity by your opponent. Let's say your opponent has random king 9 or whatever ace 5, then there's no way that you're in a position where the river's an ace and you get outdrawn or something like that. or the river's a king and ace-5 bluffs, and you get out drawn. In this case, when Robol's checking, I would just guess that he's going to be check raising sufficiently and would never bet this. If I'm betting this, I'm folding because I don't really see what my Robol would check raise versus 2 players in a multi-way spot with a range that isn't very strong. Are there going to be some bluffs in there? Sure. Are there enough bluffs in there? I think so. As good as a river as Robol can. How many shopping, I think?
And for Kulik, I would think if we play it like this up until now, the deuce of diamonds is the one where we just call off.
Commentator says, if you're going to play it like this, then probably this is going to be the river where you just call it down. But yeah, like if you're sitting there and you're thinking that Robol bluffs the turn and there's going to be all those bluffs in there still, then probably you want to call here, but it's a very bad call. This is punting a lot. Yeah, and I think Robol's severely under bluffing, to be honest. It was a good run out. In the beginning of the hand, I said you don't really want to be all-in very often here, so. Raised to 2.2k. 3-bet by Steven, which is very standard. This call is actually pretty cool because Gottlieb has been punting Rev Knight in center, and so keeping him in is a cool move. I kind of like this. Like it is a little bit better if you're not very deep. Like if you're 200k deep, then it's kind of annoying because probably you want to put all the chips in versus Kulik in most situations. But yeah, if there's like 200k behind them, that becomes a bit more iffy on some boards. But I don't hate this. You do this online sometimes when you're playing versus a pretty big recreational and you realize, hey, I can 4-bet here and then I just take my EV, but I can gain some more. Kulik is potentially invited into the pot and punting it. Interesting spot for Steven. Like, you get raised in position by a seemingly pretty decent player. I don't know the guy. Gottlieb seems to be playing relatively solid. So if you get raised here multi-way, it's not the most enticing spot to be in. Don't really think you can fold at any point though. Probably you just want to call, and I think you just want to call and try to see what's happening. Keep like some of the random bluffs that are going to be in there occasionally in. So you're going to raise, I don't think that's a thing. Like, yeah, Steven is not really going to raise King Queen or King Jack multi-way. Sorry, Gottlieb's not going to raise King Queen or King Jack very often, and so this is gross. Yeah, like he probably won't get away from this realistically, but effectively what you'd want to do here, I think, as Steven, is just call and just keep some of the random raises. They're not going to be many, but some of those random raises in there so that you have the option to just call and call down. Putting it in now, you're just going to get it in versus, well, aces not very often, but 7s, 5s. And that's about it. Maybe the occasional King 7. But I don't think you're getting it in versus King Jack or something like that. King Jack, King Queen are not going to be raising multi-way very often and so on. Yeah. Can't blame him much. It's a very strong hand. That's it for this video. Thank you all for watching. If you're interested in the course, it's live on Run It Once now, and you can get access to all this data. So I urge you all to check it out if you're interested in it. If you're a live player, if you're an online player, and you want to gain an understanding of where regulars and recreationals are deviating from other player profiles and from solvers, then the course contains about 100 videos at this point. I think 20, 30 PDFs with data on pretty much every node of the game tree. So check it out. For now, if you're playing today, good luck at the tables, and talk to you guys soon. Bye.